Hello, friends. We are back with episode 212 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. Boy, that number keeps going up, and sometimes it surprises even me. But I'm happy to have you join us from wherever you are around the world. And if you're new to the show, this is the weekly podcast, usually weekly podcast, where we talk about the excellent highlights and other resources that are shared on this week's Our Weekly issue at ourweekly.org. My name is Eric Nance, and like I said, I'm happy to have you join us. It's already been a hectic morning for me personally, where I was part of a R Pharma Diversity Alliance hackathon with version control, and I'm happy to say no fires with Git had to be put out, and we got 3 pull requests in, so I'm going to call that a win. So already a nice day going so far, but the day's getting even better because who's joining me here on the virtual screen here? It is my awesome co-host, Mike Thomas. Mike, do you have any Git fires today? I hope everything's going well over there.
No Git fires. Today's a good day because I am writing code. I'm doing targets, Quarto, types, intersection, and everything is working swimmingly for now.
I feel like I should say, oh my, afterwards, but that is a very gnarly combination. But yeah, I'm really interested to see the fruits of those labors, and I've been knee-deep in many workflow actions myself, whether in targets or even in GitHub Actions proper, and debugging those is always an adventure. But that's not the focus today. We got our weekly to talk about today. And as always, let's check our notes here. Who was the individual that curated this? Oh, it's that goof me. Okay, it was my turn in the rotation. So it's about every, 8 weeks or so? I'm called upon again. So as usual, this is never an effort I do alone. We have terrific help from our fellow contributors, or curators, I should say, as well as contributors like all of you around the world, with your terrific pull requests, other suggestions, and even helping the site itself. So a special shout out to a good friend of mine from the Shiny community, Dean Atelli, who I had a great chance to meet again at PosiConf. He sent a PR to make our site looking even better, especially when you look at the all tab of the R Weekly and you get all those issues highlighted at once. Some nice CSS formatting there. As always, anything to improve the site, we are more than happy to get in there. But let's improve our knowledge, shall we? So let's dive into our highlights today. And we lead off with one of the hot topics that definitely Mike and I saw at PosiConf both this year and the year prior. Man, there is a ton of momentum around DuckDB, folks. DuckDB is becoming, you might call it the new SQLite on steroids. It is just doing so much in the community for in-memory data management. And it also has some awesome integrations with WebAssembly, other great things that we heard even at the conf with integrations with Shiny, so many integrations, even semantic searching. I could go on and on. But there is a new part of DuckDB that definitely flew under the radar for me. But this first highlight is talking about a new capability called Ducklake. And what does this mean to an R user? So let's find out, shall we? This highlight has been authored by Novika Nakov, who is, I believe, a data scientist at the Norwegian Veterinary Institute. And he calls this post jumping into the Ducklake with nothing but R on. So this has been, I guess, a newer capability offered by the company behind DuckDB. I guess the way to describe this, and I'm very new to this, kind of this hybrid of what you hear in what's called a data lake, where you often have a huge collection of data, but also some metadata associated with it to help with the storage and retrieval of various records. Well, DuckDB is getting in that town, so to speak, with Ducklake, bringing in these two concepts together. Now, how do you actually get started with this? Well, that's where in the R community, we've had the DuckDB package available to us for, probably almost 2 years now, I'd guess, somewhere along those lines. But within the package itself, of course, you get DuckDB ready for you. But one of the selling points of DuckDB is the extension system. There are extensions for all sorts of things. I remember playing with the extension for object storage retrieval and sending of Parquet files and whatnot. That's played nicely. Well, there's a new extension called the Ducklake extension. And that's where once you load up DuckDB in your R process and you create a database, usually an in-memory database to play with things, you can execute via db execute, similar to the DBI syntax, the call to install literally the Ducklake extension from the official DuckDB extension repository. With that, you can now attach a new database. They call this ducklake.metadata.ducklake as a new in-memory database. And this will create now this Ducklake version on your disk. Certainly in production usage, this Ducklake artifact would live on probably object storage of our cloud provider and whatnot. But with that, you can now play with this in your R console. Again, it's written locally to disk on a temporary basis to start with. So why do you need to care about this? So in the example in the blog post, Novica talks about let's load the empty cars set. You can load that in with a typical DB write table call. And then you can now create additional tables with this, say with a different color or a different categorization, where in this case, he's looking at a derivation of the miles per gallon over the mean of the miles per gallon as a new variable, and then creating a summary of that with some averaging, and then grouping that by the cylinders. So you've got now a layer of raw data. He's calling that bronze in this case. But this second layer that I just talked about is sort of some cleaning and normalization, typical of any data kind of pipeline. And now, if you inspect that new file-based database Ducklake that you've created here, you've got 3 files associated with these different layers of the table that he has created here. And in each of that, you've got a Parquet file. So it's using Parquet as a storage format. Again, to me, Parquet is like the new CSV. It is just everywhere now. You can't escape it. Not that you want to escape it. It makes your life a heck of a lot easier, I would say, once you get to know that better. So now, those are 3 kind of separate tables based on these derivations. But you want to figure out then something that I think is still on the bleeding edge here is being able to track kind of how these tables are related to each other. He does have some code that would be in the ideal case of how you define like parent tables, child tables, when it's created other metadata. I believe that's not quite working as expected, but there are some additional metadata you can put in the table, Ducklake, I should say, nonetheless, such as executing different values into the filtering operation, and then visualizing then the relationship amongst these tables. So you got these Parquet files that are kind of stored on disk, right? And that's where you can now select from these relationships that you've established. And again, some code works, I believe some doesn't. Haven't tried it myself. But then you can create then a graph of the kind of ontology of the way these tables relate to each other. And there's an example here in the blog post. It looks like a kind of a DAG of sorts, where it goes from one part of the table, and I have to zoom in on my browser because it is kind of small on my screen here. From the first level, he called it the bronze version of MT cars. And then it branches off into separate branches of these different derivations that have been made here with this silver layer. And then from one of those layers, it branches off again to this gold layer at the very end, calling it kind of a catalog of sorts, but visualizing how those are related. So what he thinks the value of this is that when you have this metadata establishing the relationship amongst these tables, you could now put this relationship diagram of sorts, whether it's like this graph here in the post or elsewhere, that could go in like your internal documentation for this, set of databases or set of tables. Thinking of Quarto that Mike mentioned he's been working on. Maybe a Shiny app that visualizes the relationships amongst these. There are a lot of things that this could be used for. And in fact, he even puts at the end, on top of the gist that has the code for the blog post, maybe you want to fold this into part of an existing data pipeline, we covered in, I think, last year's Our Weekly Highlights, a package called Maestro that helps you kind of take a workflow-like approach to building data pipelines. This could be a good fit for those as well. So my take on this is that A, it's standing on a well-established format for saving these to disk, a Parquet, but it's not just the derivations themselves. You are able to add kind of relationships for these tables as metadata and then have that available however you choose to visualize it. So I'm still very new to this. I do want to play with this a bit once I get into more complex setup, but it's great to see that with an extension away, you can now play with a little bit at your fingertips of what the Ducklake promise sets to be. So really informative post, and shout out to Novika who sent this my way on Blue Sky, and I'm like, yes, please give me all the DuckDB content you can pass at me. So I'm enjoying this. But yeah, Mike, does this get your creative juices going what you do with DuckDB?
It does, very much so, and I'm loving DuckDB. It's still pigeonholed on a lot of projects with clients that we have on some of the larger, data lake, if you will, like engines and providers, your Databricks and your Snowflakes of the world. And anytime I'm working on one of those projects, I always feel like if I had the opportunity to start now from scratch, we wouldn't need it. We could just use DuckDB, Parquet files, and things like Ducklake here to essentially do most of the same stuff for free in a completely open source way that we would have more control over as well. And I think the benefits of DuckDB are not something that we need to go into again, because I've probably talked about that way too much on this podcast. I just talked about that probably for 5 or 10 minutes at PositConf last week, really how great of a project that is. And there's a lot more coming out on that project as well. Ducklake being one of them. I think Mother Duck as well as sort of a tangential project that allows you to leverage, cloud compute and distributed computing, I believe, as opposed to needing to run things on your own laptop if you want. So a lot of advancements going on in this space. And I think one of the real pillars of what Ducklake is able to do and what Novika is demonstrating in the blog post is kind of this concept, and you may have heard it if you're familiar with things like Databricks or Snowflake, of time travel, really, such that you can start out with an initial data set or a table, which is under the hood going to be represented in a Parquet file, stored in a Parquet file. And any changes that you make to that, through SQL update statements, through SQL insert or delete statements, will also be tracked in subsequent Parquet files within that same storage. And there's this abstraction layer that you can write SQL sort of on top of that storage, and the way that the files are named and organized in this Ducklake convention, which is not necessarily new, as you mentioned. This data lake protocol has been around kind of for a while, but the sort of the protocol allows you to write SQL on top of it to say, query this table as of this particular time or as of this particular version. And under the hood, it can figure out what data it needs to query, what inserts to apply, what deletions need to be applied as well to show you the data that you're essentially asking for. So it kind of builds up this set of Parquet files in your storage. And I think this kind of time travel notion is the biggest sort of selling point of what Ducklake has to offer right now. And really appreciated Novika taking that one step further in places where, I'm not sure DuckDB has like visual representations yet, but trying to actually show lineage as well beyond that. So I thought that was really cool. And Ducklake, I think out of the box, tries to recommend leveraging Parquet for file storage and Postgres for essentially your data catalog, and allowing you to, or your metadata, if you will, on top of your data warehouse or your data lake that you're creating. So that combination is interesting as well, maybe good to know in terms of context here. But I really enjoyed this write-up because I haven't seen a whole lot of, diving into some of the weeds and these new developments in what's in DuckDB. I've seen a lot of getting started, but in terms of getting started with Ducklake here, it's not something I had seen a whole lot of before. So really appreciate Novica putting this together for us.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to pursue this and maybe some lower risk projects just with some assorted simulated data. But I could see this time travel aspect. Not some I deal with a whole lot on the strictly clinical data kind of stuff I do for most of the day job, but certainly as we look at different evolving stages of, say, assumptions about data and different derivations across its life cycle, this could be a great tool in our toolbox. So this is in the highlights for a reason. I think this is a great way to start off this episode. Well, Mike, you mentioned you had a spectacular presentation that you had at PosiConf, and I watched the recording again. It was just as I thought when it was live. But you and I had something in common with that, other than just, of course, us being presenters at PosiConf. We really like using Quarto with Reveal.js to create our slides these days. It has just been an absolute pleasure compared to what I usually have to do at the day job, which I will save that rant for another time. You probably know what I'm talking about. But it is really, really handy to take what I'm comfortable with, Markdown syntax, and break these up into literally different sections of my slides. If I need to style it up, I sure can. If I don't need to style it up and I just want nice, convenient things like 2-column layouts, embedding code chunks, annotating through those code chunks, highlighting things as I progressively build. All that comes out of the box of Reveal.js and Quarto. Absolutely love it. And I have bookmarked a lot of stuff in my collection of bookmarks with the Quarto tag. And they're either from people that made Quarto or those that are like us making slides with Quarto, and they do some neat little trick. And I'm like, I got to bookmark that. There's a lot of these tips out there. A lot of them are quite scattered. But there's been one person at the forefront of collecting these in such a way that we could benefit as a community. And boy, he has taken that even up 100 notches here. So we are speaking of the newly released online book called Slidecrafting, authored by who has been one of the ones at the forefront of this, Emil Vifveld, who is as a Posit engineer at Posit, does a lot of work with the Tidy Models team, but he has also been making so many great resources about Quarto, and in particular making slides of Quarto. His blog post that he called Slidecrafting had been featured as previous highlights before, but now he has assembled them into one place called the Slidecrafting book. And this is still early. We only saw this come out, I believe, about a week ago or so. It was after Conf for sure. And it's got a collection of all these tips that have been scattered, or he has mentioned in his previous blog post. But it's not feature complete yet. But what it has here is definitely enough to get you started on the right foot. All with kind of a crash course of creating your own custom theme for your Quarto slides in 10 minutes or less. It literally has, from start to finish, what that process looks like. And then the rest of the book goes a deeper dive into each of these. What goes into the theme, right? What colors do you select? What kind of fonts are you using? And how big or small are certain elements? Also, like I mentioned, what is the CSS styling associated with it? All of these are dedicated sections in this book, and I've already, just looking at this, have learned so much already that I'm going to take into my next Quarto presentation. And that's just the theming side of it. There's also the content block, where we're going to look at different ways that you can display your code, different ways you can highlight certain elements in your deck, changing the layout. Where do things go? Left, right, moving it up and down. All these things that you can do with Quarto are all documented here. Like I said, it's not quite done yet. It's even got other sections, such as when you're showing a code demo using things like ASCII cast to help with that kind of recording like setup of a code chunk. Ways you can bring interactivity via fragments and highlighting certain blocks of elements, changing the styling on the fly, and even the start of an extensions section, which is still not there yet, but I am going to keep watching this quite closely. There's a lot here. I've always wanted something like this because I want something where I can go to just in one bookmark, get all these tips. At some point, a lot of it will become muscle memory. It hasn't yet. So every presentation, I learn something new. I do something different. In the past one at PositConf, I did the highlighting of the code and narrated through each of those sections of like a shiny state block. But there's just so much. There's so much to learn. I think this is the start of something huge here. So yeah, is it slide crafting? Yes, it is. And I am here for it. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I can't agree more. I am slightly upset that this came out how many weeks after PositConf? Like
I think maybe a week after.
Oh man, I could have used like so much of this in my presentation. This is fantastic, and it answers so many of the little questions that I've had and just kind of not done the deep research into to figure it out, like image placement, layouts, things like that are just these great quality of life improvements for your presentation that I knew I needed to incorporate, but just didn't have the bandwidth or didn't necessarily have a resource like this that I could go to quickly get answers to my questions. And don't get me started on what the LLMs fail to know about Quarto, Reveal.js at this point, because I tried and struggled quite a bit with some of the responses I was getting. But anyways, this is almost like a big book of type of a resource, and it's not super dense either. I mean, there's a ton of content here, but it's pretty easy and well organized to get to what you might be looking for. And even if you're not looking for something specific, like I did in preparation for the show today, I found myself, scrolling through every section, taking 2 minutes per section and picking up something constantly in terms of theming and SCSS, which is, I promise, not as scary as it may sound if you're not familiar with CSS or SCSS. It's maybe a little different to look at first, but the amount of control that it gives you to incorporate your company's or your organization's brand and logos and colors into your slide presentation that go a long way, believe it or not, to getting folks to pay attention to what you're presenting to them. Everything is essentially right here, and some fantastic little things that I could have certainly used. I had some slides in my presentation that I needed to kind of manually. We had a clicker that we were holding, but I needed someone out there may have the same type of situation. But some had elements in the slide that I needed to scroll down, and your clicker can't necessarily do that. You would have to go to your mouse or your touchpad on your laptop to be able to do that. It's not just advancing a slide or not advancing a slide. Well, of course, ML has a section in here, I believe under fragments potentially, that shows me exactly how I could have done that. Advance a tab set or change tab sets, I should say, or scroll on some content that's on your slide through the back and forward buttons in the presentation. Oh man, I could have used that so much. But anyways, just a fantastic resource. I can't even pick sort of one area to highlight because I was just picking up stuff everywhere throughout this book. So I'm excited to see how it continues to expand, but a ton of content here, a great start. I think it's easily digestible. And if you go to this URL and don't find something that you learned that you didn't know before, I'll give you $1. That's how confident I am.
This is amazing here. And one thing as I'm assembling my notes through various presentations, even if I see a potential to hopefully add maybe to this, I'm hopeful that this will be a community-driven effort as well. I may have some things to add around the video playing when you can embed videos in Quarto. There's some neat tricks you can do with that as well, which were really handy for my talk with the Mega Man inspired app demos that went without a hitch. Thank goodness for that, because that was a late night hack to get there, but that'll be another time. But yeah, even you, Mike, you utilize videos nicely in your part of the presentation and talk about pull requests and issue notes. So yeah, I could see, this is definitely growing, but boy, there is enough here now that for your next Quarto presentation, whether you're doing this at the day job or you have an external conference you're presenting at, I think you're going to have enough here to do a terrific job from both the UX side of it and, like I hope, have fun doing it, because it is a lot of fun to make these. Well, if I'm the curator for our weekly issue, I'm going to have something with Shiny involved in a podcast. So luckily, this was voted by others as well, not just me. But especially at PosiConf and many avenues before this, we are seeing very much the intersection of large language models to enhance both development, but also giving unique experiences to Shiny apps that just simply were not possible even just a couple of years ago. There has been a terrific series that kind of takes you from literal start to finish, so to speak, on how you might approach building LLM AI model capabilities in your next Shiny app. And so we are talking about the third in this series called The Shiny Side of LLMs. And this has been authored by Vera Elftink van Leemput, who has been a prolific member in the Shiny community since near the beginning. She has done tremendous resources. She's also doing courses about Shiny as well with a platform called Athletics that I've heard great things about. But in any event, she has been embarking on this journey to bring up to speed somebody who's new to the world of large language models. What are the nuts and bolts behind how it works? But now we're at the third part, where we actually plug this in to a Shiny app. So the first parts are talking about what LLMs actually do and what they don't. And then the next part talked about going from prompts that you put into the LLM interfaces and how the responses are constructed. Like I said, now it's time to put this in action. And this comes full circle what we last talked about, because the use case for this is going to build a Shiny app that will let you upload the contents of your Quarto presentation and get feedback from the LLM on what's working well and what might be tweaked. So it is, in essence, a peer reviewer of your next Quarto slide presentation. Oh boy, you told out things I wish I had had sooner. Maybe I could have used this before the conference talk. But nonetheless, better late than never. So she's calling this app Deck Check. And it's going to start with some narrative here in the post about first why we choose Shiny. Well, I think the question is why not, but that's another point for another day. The point being is that within the ecosystem, now we have packages both on the R side and the Python side to integrate these chat-like interfaces into your app. This is called Shiny Chat on the R side and Chat Lass on the Python side. So once you have that ready to go and install either of those packages for your use case, you've now got to choose the LLM provider, of course. I've been a big fan of Anthropic's Claude Code. Their models have done really well for me. But nonetheless, whichever either hosted platform you choose, you're likely going to have to get an API key, because this is going to go into your configuration based with the Elmer package to make all this work. But like I said, there are code examples here to build this app literally from beginning to end. And we start off with getting the chat interface going outside of Shiny. So I'm going to focus on the R tabs here in this, what looks like a Quarto blog post with Elmer and configuring the chat tie-in to Anthropic. So there's a chat _ Anthropic object that you create where you just say the model, the system prompt that you give it, again, plain text, and any additional parameters specific to the model itself. And then this is something new. It's not just the chat object, but you want to plug this into Shiny, right? And for this, you want to be able to kind of have that nice streaming effect as the response comes in. And that's where Elmer comes with the stream method of this chat object. And then that's where you feed into it some language that you want displayed in the app itself, and then be able to tell the LLM what to do with that. I've never played with the stream object before, so or stream methods. I definitely want to play with this after this episode, probably. It does some unique generator based on the Quarto package. I believe that's a way to kind of do the looping correctly, but this is really neat. So it gives you that natural look and feel when the LLM is responding back after the user uploads their Quarto presentation. The other thing to keep in mind is that you don't want to have a bottleneck in your app as this response comes in. You want to take advantage of what's called asynchronous processing. This is great for the UX of all this so that your chat doesn't grind things to a halt with the rest of the app as the response comes in. That's where it's a combination of, again, the Elmer package and in this case, the promises package on the R side to do the special chat _ async function. So this is flagged to do asynchronous mode for this, and it returns what's called a promise object afterwards that will be rendered or resolved when the app needs it, but it's not going to stop everything else. So with that, you've got kind of the building blocks in place, and now it's time to build the UI. This is where, for preparing my talk at the conf, I did a vibe coding session to prepare the UI in my demo, and I got like 90% of the way there. But here she's done the hard work for you. A simple layout with BSLib. Got a nice sidebar or page fluid layout, I should say, where we've got a module for the chat component and a header at the top, kind of at like a little placeholder for the user to ask anything about the presentation. Very simple UI. Again, a module, chat mod UI is going to drive most of this from the Shiny Chat package. On the server side, it's making that connection to the Anthropic model and then rendering the server side of this chat interface, chat mod server. They've done the hard work for you. This is a module, plug and play. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Really great to see the progress on this because I saw the early days of it. It was a lot of custom code. Now, right off the shelf with Shiny Chat. So once you have that, then you've got the scaffolding of an UI. It's very straightforward right now. We're just seeing, does this work? And then you see in the screenshot here, the prompt that was added as part of that metadata going into the chat object, and then the response from the LLM based on the title that the user entered. They call it the shiny side of LLMs. What's your feedback? And it's got the response there. So we know the plumbing works, right? Now it's time to make the app look nice. We can't just do that one column interface, right? So now she does a little whiteboarding here, a sketching here of what the app will look like, a nice sidebar layout with cards that are added to the application. We got the main content, and then there's a nice animated screen of what they're working towards, the app in action. The LLM prompt is on the left, the chat interface. There's a nice little CSS loader icon. And then once it's done, it's got a whole bunch of like a series of value boxes at the top, things like length of presentation and other content, and then the actual advice that it has for the given presentation with various pieces of feedback. So all the code is here for both R and Python, and you get, again, this very nice UI. And the app itself is doing a lot under the hood, right? It's actually taking that uploaded Quarto file, and then it's running Quarto under the hood to get the HTML version, and then it's getting that HTML file, which is then fed to the LLM based on what they've added in the back end of it. So there's this nice kind of diagram showing how this process works. But in the end, you can copy this app, right from the blog post and try it out for yourself, provided you've got that key to Anthropic or whatever AI service you want to do here. So there's other enhancements that she talks about here, such as a loading experience where you get that nice little loading icon when things are happening, so the user's not left with just a white screen doing nothing. Those nice value boxes at the top, nice refinements, again, just giving that extra nudge, that extra pizzazz to the user experience. But there's a lot more to this. There's styling, there's how you handle error checking, but this is as comprehensive of a post I've ever seen to take one of these apps from start to finish. So there's some nice examples, like I said, for error checking. And then when you're ready to go, there's a great section on what you would do to deploy this. Obviously, there are platforms like Posit Connect that would be able to take this, Shiny Apps IO, the internal Posit Connect or the external Posit Connect cloud. But if I dare say so myself, another way you could host this would be containers as well, and plug that into whatever app, service that lets you host a container. Again, you build the app, you've got many choices where you host it. Either way, as always, if you're going to put something like this for public facing, whether internal your organization or in the public domain, be wary of the usage of that API key, because you don't want to break the bank too. But in the end, for a small app that doesn't have more than a handful of users, I doubt you'll do very much. Adjacent to this post, I had a colleague ask me, hey, you've been using Anthropic for a while. What's been your cost of this? Looked back at my cost. I kid you not, Mike, from January to now, my cost for Anthropic has been a whopping $3.20.
It's time you did some explaining.
That's less than a lunch at the cafeteria. So I dare say I'm doing things right, I hope.
I believe it.
So that's where, just from little old me developing and using it with Shiny or Positron Assistant and in some very low-level apps, that's pretty tangible. But again, fantastic series of posts here. This is a great example of taking the concepts from the first parts, now put it into action for a literal use case that I most definitely will be using before my next presentation. But Mike, we've been watching this space for a while. What did you think of Verle's exploration here?
It would be one thing for Virla to just, use some sort of toy example and go through the entire process of creating both R and Python Shiny apps with the LLM capabilities in the back end, the ability to render the Quarto document. Doing that all in just one language would be incredible. She's done it in both languages and with a use case that is incredibly, relevant or tangible, practical for anybody that's having to make a Quarto presentation, which we just talked about in the last blog post, and we've both done recently. And by the way, your presentation at PositConf was fantastic. I think you gave me a little too many flowers there compared to your presentation, but this is, as you mentioned, probably one of the most comprehensive blog posts I've ever seen. I think it's well deserved that it's on Posit's series of Shiny blog posts, and I'll just pick out maybe a couple things that I really like. I think the error handling is something that we talk about a lot, Eric, and ensuring that your users aren't suddenly just seeing like red letters in error messages that are cryptic on their screen, and you do your best to try to, this is an approach we always take, is maybe pop up a modal when there is an error that tells them, hey, something went wrong. Maybe you're able to provide some paths or if statements that categorize what went wrong to give them a message, or maybe you even just voice the message itself, that you would see in the terminal in that modal, but it's a much better user experience than the whole app essentially just breaking, right? We certainly don't want that to happen if possible. The UI and the design here, I appreciated the time that she took to wireframe what she wanted to put together before that. And it's also, I don't think this is the purpose of the blog post, but even just some of the ways that she went about crafting her prompt a system prompt, if you will, to sort of instruct the LLM what it should do, how it should respond and things like that were really interesting to me. She does have a system prompt in there, and then she has sort of a more verbose regular prompt, and the results look fantastic. I'm very excited. I have my Claude API key ready, and it seems like I can just sort of copy and paste this code locally and try to run it myself, and I'm quite sure I'm going to be blown away here. But a fantastic deep dive into the art of the possible with Shiny for R, Shiny for Python, and their associated LLM counterparts these days.
Yeah, I am literally this afternoon going to build a custom Nix dev environment with Rix just for this, because I am that eager to try it out. So absolutely, that is on my list here. And again, this was the third part, the culmination of a 3-part series. So definitely, like I said, if you're new to this, definitely check out her existing material. It does a great job of breaking down what can be very ambiguous terms if you're new to this. I mean, even me personally, I still get tripped up by some of the terminology thrown left or right on LinkedIn posts or whatever else in conversation. So I definitely like to have it explained to me practically, but not in a condescending way either. Verily does a terrific job with this. So yeah, this is right in my wheelhouse. And yeah, I'm still doing Quarto slides. Might have to do one again before the end of the year. So this is going to be utilized for darn sure. But we hope you also utilize the rest of the R Weekly issue. We are running a bit strapped for time, so no additional fines here. I do, well, maybe selfishly speaking, I do have in this issue my adventures with switching the Shiny Dev Series site to Quarto. So apropos of what we talked about today, lots of interesting findings there. I'm back to blogging now. I got a blog component of the Shiny Dev Series. So who knows how long it'll last, but I'm going to try and be diligent with it. But it was good to get the creative juices going again. So that's in there, but also many, many other things too. So with that, we will wrap up here. But of course, we love hearing from you in the community, and we got many ways to get in touch with us. You can send a pull request. That's definitely appropriate after what I went through this morning. A pull request to the Markdown files that comprise the R Weekly project, especially the next issue. We have a draft Markdown file. If you find a great resource, new package, great blog post, maybe you wrote a great blog post, you want it featured, yeah, just send a pull request to that draft issue template, and the next curator will be glad to merge it in. And also, you can get in touch with us on the social medias out there. You can find me on Blue Sky these days, where I am at ourpodcast.bsky.social. Also on Mastodon at ourpodcast at podcastindex.social. That's a mouthful sometimes. And I'm also on LinkedIn. You can search my name and you find me there. Mike, where can they get a hold of you?
You can find me on Blue Sky at mike-thomas.bsky.social. Or you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK. You can see what I'm up to.
Awesome stuff. And again, big shout out to all the listeners out there that said hi to us back at the conf. I will always appreciate all those kind words. We're trying to get back to the regular schedule here. We're doing our part, trying to anyway. But nonetheless, we'll close up shop for episode 212, I should say, of Our Weekly Highlights. And we will be back with another episode of Our Weekly Highlights next week. Hello, friends. We are back of episode 212. All right.
Well, so I had my speaker notes, on one screen,
right,
and then my slides on the other screen, and I thought that if I pressed play on the video in my speaker notes that it would translate. And
they're separate. Oh. They're separate. I found out the hard way the night before. Yep.
Oh man. Okay.
I didn't know you had videos in yours. I would have told you.
No, I know. I know. I'll have to check your gift.